So first of all, let's review what is Horary astrology. It's a branch of astrology that focuses on answering questions arising in the moment, and the questions have a birth moment, right? That's a charts we use for Horary astrology. Traditional astrology, which I rely on, and all the theories that I present to you are based on traditional astrology. Occasionally, I refer to modern astrologers, modern traditional astrologers, but the theoretical part comes from the traditional astrology. And so within that tradition, I will rely on 7 visible planets as lords and the rulers of the signs and houses, Ptolemaic major aspects only in the charts, which are conjunction, sextile, trine, square, and opposition, and so-called significators. In Horary astrology, we call the person who is asking the question the querent, and it's the first house, the ascendant. And the person or a situation that we're inquiring about is called the quasited. And it's in this class, in this lecture, it will be the 7th house and the 10th house, but it can be any house that the person is wishing to know about. So it's a matter asked about called the quasited. And finally, in Horary astrology, we use the moon, co-significator of the querent and the question. So these are the basic principles that we operate on in Horary analysis and delineation. So let's start with the lawsuits, because you will see that the theory and the rules of controversies, lawsuits, contentions, they generally apply across other subjects, but there are some nuances. First of all, when you analyzing a Horary chart for a lawsuit or controversy, you need to assign your significators, who is whom in the chart. And that's important because from there you can get the right judgment. So the person who is asking the question about the lawsuit is querent, as we said earlier, and it's in the first house. It's represented, the person is represented by Lord of the first house and the moon. Authorities also advise us to look at the last planet the moon has separated from, last separating aspect. And the opponent will be the 7th house, Lord of the 7th house, and the next planet the moon is applying to. So some authorities say only use the moon separating applying aspect if truly it exists, because it's not always there. Planets in the 1st and the 7th, they could act as co-significators of the querent and opponent. When we're looking about the judgment, we're looking at the 10th house. The judge is the 10th house, and the judgment is the 10th house. We may want to look at the end of the matter, which is the 4th house, and the dispositor of the moon. They show us how matters will resolve and in whose favor. We'll be using it to determine who is the winner. Assets, witnesses, advocates are the 2nd house. And I added here the lawyers as the 9th house. In my practice group, we sometimes discuss, and there is a bit of uncertainty who to use in the lawsuits and controversies, the 2nd house or the 9th house. So I reviewed a lot of literature for this class, and I would say traditional authors do not really use the 9th house in context of the lawsuits and controversies. They talk about the 2nd house as a cumulatively described witnesses, advocates, anything that supports the querent, and likewise the 8th house would be anything that supports the adversary. So the 9th house, I think, is useful for when you're, let's say someone needs to find a lawyer or consult with the lawyer. So that shows a learned person, so you could consult with the 9th house. But within the traditional literature, the references you will see at the bottom of the lecture, they don't mention the 9th house, not even William Lilly. So in my analysis, I will rely on these 4. So there might be 2 scenarios, right? And that's one of the challenging parts about judging the controversial charts. If person comes to you, first scenario, person comes to you and asks about the court case that they're engaged in, that's easy because you always assign the querent to the 1st house. Their opponent, therefore, becomes the 7th house. But sometimes you're considering a public case, or maybe a person is asking about public case that is well known, or asking about someone else that's not personally related to the querent, that may be removed, a question about the 3rd party in the lawsuit or controversy. Or sometimes in my group, we consider electional charts for the beginning of a lawsuit, or for example, for a court hearing day. So sometimes you might want to judge the electional chart. In that case, all the traditional authorities advise to use first house as a plaintiff or the prosecution. So whoever initiates the motion, the movement, the lawsuit is the first house. So that's the side initiating the action. And the opponent would be, of course, the seventh. And so the rest of the houses would be used the same way. So before figuring out who is the winner, all offers that I reviewed, they were discussing, is there a chance that parties will reach an agreement? And general consensus is this. This is a summary of many, many different authors that I reviewed. The traditional astrology says that if Lord of the first and Lord of the seventh applied by any major aspect, parties will reach an agreement. Even if it's a square in opposition suggests fights. Perhaps they will go to court for some time, delays the resolution, but generally applying aspects between the parties, especially with reception, suggests sooner or later they will find a compromise. Of course, sextile and trine are more helpful and they lead more to peaceful resolution. Same applies to the conjunction, or if the parties, if the significators were in the same sign, it suggests peaceful resolution. Faster moving planets tend to be the parties initiating the peace. And if there is a mutual reception, it always helps, either mutual reception or singular side reception, it helps to find the resolution. It is actually much more unfortunate or difficult if the parties are separating. If I'm jumping here to the bottom of this, right? If the parties, if Lord of the first and Lord of the seventh are separating, this prolongs the controversy. So actually, application of the significators is positive. If Lord of the first or Lord of the seventh apply to Lord of the 10th, which is the judge, then they cannot resolve it themselves, and the judge will have to resolve the dispute. Now, if Lord of the first applies to Lord of the 10th, but the other side not, then querent prevails. And if the Lord of the 10th applies to Lord of the first, then judge favors the querent. So either way, basically connection between the first house and the 10th house, unless it's greatly afflicted, gives preference to the querent. And likewise for the 7th house, if L7 applies to L10 or L10 to L7, then the other party is favored. In no situation, if Lord of the first is combust, the querent is injured, and house position will tell how. So for example, if in the 2nd house will be injured financially, if in the 3rd house maybe some kind of rumors or things related to relatives, in the 4th house family matters, and so on. But if benefics are in aspect with the Lord of the first, they help escape. Or if benefics are present in the 1st house. If malefics are connecting with Lord of the first, especially Mars, they damage the querent. And I already said that if the planets are separating, that prolongs the controversy. You will see in the examples. If Lord of the 10th, if the judge separates from the significators, it also prolongs the controversy. In all situations, if our main significators are retrograding or combust, well, retrograding specifically, it suggests, according to traditional writers, laziness of parties and delays in controversy.